Hello, welcome back to RetroBreak. You probably all know how, as one of the best game developers of the 8-bit era, they made amazing classics like the Kirby series on the NES and the Game Boy, as well as some lesser known titles like Kabuki Quantum Fighter, Adventures of Lolo, and Revenge of the Gator Pinball. But there's one game that I never hear anyone talking about, so that's why I've made this video today, to tell you guys all about an amazing game for the Game Boy called Trax. Let's see what it's all about. Trax plays like a lot of other top-down shooting games that were released around the same time, but it has a twist, or should I say lack of twist. The turret on the tank can only move to the right by holding down the A button. Of course it was made this way because of a lack of the second D-pad on the Game Boy, but I just love that they tried to come up with an official in-game explanation as to why this is. So in the manual it states here, their only weapon, an outmoded tank, so creaky its treads have been replaced by rubber tyres and its turrets will only turn to the right. It's dispatched to the capital city to take on the cold and cruel King of Akuda. The little tank that could creaks off to perform its mission, to bravely go where no tank has gone before. You'd think that not being able to aim properly would really hinder your enjoyment of the game, but I actually feel that it's designed very well to accommodate this strange control scheme. It can be quite fun trying to spin your tank around while dodging bullets coming from behind, all the while trying to line up your attack. Although sometimes it can also be very frustrating, especially if you accidentally turn too far. Apart from that one gameplay quirk though, it's pretty much your standard shooting game, complete with a small selection of power-ups, including piercing bullets. These bullets move slowly but pack a lot of punch. They also go through all the enemies and bosses unlike the other weapons. There's the Big Boy. This one is a bomb-themed weapon which explodes on impact, destroying everything within a limited area. There's double turrets. This one shoots 2 bullets simultaneously, one at the front and one at the back, making it a lot easier as you don't have to rotate all the way around to face the enemies in front of you. And finally there's Tri-Bombs, which fires 3 bullets at once, a bit like the spread gun from Contra. The game is very short, even in Game Boy terms. The whole game can be completed in about 15 to 20 minutes, which to be honest isn't really a bad thing. These days I do enjoy a game that I can finish pretty quickly, and it's also worth replaying to try and get a faster time or a better score. I had a look online and the current world record for the fastest time to complete Trax is 6 minutes and 52 seconds, so I've got a lot of practicing to do if I want to get anywhere close to that. The game is split up into 4 different levels, each one with a mini-boss and a full-size boss fight at the end. The levels are as follows. First up there's the grassland, which is the village in which you start the game. There's enemies lurking behind every tree, peeking out from behind every building. Danger is all around, but you must step lightly. This is your village, so you must be careful where you shoot. This is obviously a very straightforward level, it's the first level in the game, but it does a really good job to introduce you to the mechanics. The second level is called Base in the Desert, or Sabaton Desert as it's called in the instruction manual. This one is a very simple, straightforward level that just moves up. As the name suggests, you'll be destroying bases, you'll be fighting off tanks. There's a really interesting mid-boss in this stage, which is kind of like a giant version of your character that you fight, and it also has my favourite end-level boss as well, which is a really big robot that jumps and falls around all over the place. All in all, a very fun level. Stage 3 is the Mountain Cave, and this is probably the most interesting level in the game. In this level you start outside, going through some winding corridors, and then you reach a cave and it actually moves inside into even more confined spaces. This is definitely the most interesting level in the game. There's lots of things to avoid. There's train tracks in the mines, which is cool. You've got things to avoid coming out of them. It's got a really interesting end of level boss as well, which is basically a giant hand that comes from all corners of the screen and tries to grab you, so you definitely have to be used to turning the turret round to be able to defeat it. And the final stage is of course the capital city, and thankfully they upped the difficulty in this level. The rest of the game was so easy that it's quite nice to have a little bit of challenge. And at the end of this stage you actually have to fight all of the previous bosses before you get to the final boss. So it ends on quite a high note. I enjoyed this one. So with all that said, I'll give the gameplay a 7 out of 10. So the graphics are all really nice and clear, especially on the original Game Boy's bad screen. I think they did very well to differentiate the characters from the backgrounds. Unfortunately, they don't stand out nearly as much as some of HAL's other Game Boy games though. The highlight is definitely the boss fights, with big, well-animated sprites moving smoothly around the screen. They are quite impressive to look at. Unfortunately, the level designs themselves are not as impressive. There's also quite a bit of slowdown, which includes some sprite flicker when things get a bit more hectic. Sadly, the slowdown happens a bit more often than I'd like, and it can hinder your enjoyment of the game. Overall though, I do feel like the sprites are nice, and the game does have some charm to it, especially the bosses, and also a really nice little cutscene at the end. So I'd give the graphics a 6 out of 10. Now for the sound, something else which might hinder your enjoyment of the title. It's very repetitive, as you've probably noticed in the background to this video. I counted only 5 different tunes in the entire game. There's basically one main level theme which repeats constantly throughout 3 of the 4 stages. There's boss fights music, which is a little bit faster. And there's a separate theme for in the caves. And it does have a nice catchy credits theme, but apart from that there really isn't anything to write home about. The sound effects can get kind of annoying and drown out the music a little bit. It's not the worst sound out of the Game Boy, but if you were expecting something like in the same sort of quality as the Kirby's Dream Land series, then you're going to be very, very disappointed. I give the sound a 4 out of 10. And for my final thoughts, overall I found the game to be an interesting curiosity and a unique look into HAL's history as a developer. But to be honest, playing the game on its own, it's not really worth tracking down unless you've already played and completed all of HAL's other Game Boy games. Now before we wrap this review up, I'd like to say some of the things that I would improve with the game. I would like to see it have a few more levels, maybe double the amount to 8 stages, which seems to be the norm in 8-bit games at the time. I would also love it if each stage had its own theme to accompany it, in terms of graphics and the soundtrack, kind of like Mega Man, because that was something that made me really excited about visiting all the different levels, whereas in this game they all kind of feel very similar to each other. I did really like the boss fights though, so I would like to see a lot more interesting boss fights for the other stages. And although the controls take some getting used to, I wouldn't really change them as it gives the game character. Instead, I would probably add some more choices to the power-up system, maybe make it so that the weapons can be powered up several times instead of just once. And the final thing that I'd like to change about the game is to make it a bit harder overall. Maybe not by introducing more enemies, because that would add more lag and slowdown. I would probably just increase the damage that the enemies actually take on you. And before I finish this review, there is actually a multiplayer mode as well, which I didn't get a chance to play, but it does sound kind of interesting, so let me know down in the comments below if you've ever played the multiplayer part of this game. So the final score I'm going to give the game is a 5.7 out of 10. And just for comparison, I had a look online to see what scores the game got around the time of its release. Maybe I was a little bit harsh on it, they seem to range from about 80 to 60%. So thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed finding out about one of HAL's lesser known games, Trax, on the Game Boy. Let me know down below if you've ever played it before. Let me know what you thought of the game. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, check out my Patreon or Ko-fi. There's links in the descriptions to all of them. And I'll see you next time for the next episode. Goodbye!